Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the place where we take stacks of sources and extract the gold, ensuring that you walk away being instantly, thoroughly well-informed. Today, we are focusing on a name you probably know, Clarissa Harlow Barton, or as pretty much everyone calls her, Clara Barton.
Right. And most people, when they hear that name, they picture one of two things.
The Civil War nurse.
Or the founder of the Red Cross.
Yeah.
And that's really just scratching the surface. It's a very two-dimensional portrait.
It is.
The sources we've been digging into, they reveal a woman whose life was, well, it wasn't a career path. It was more like a series of radical, groundbreaking, and often, accidental pivots.
Accidental is a great word for it. She was a teacher who started her own free school, a federal clerk who demanded and got equal pay to men.
A battlefield logistics expert who basically invented her own supply chain on the fly. And then a global disaster coordinator.
And get this. She did all of it years, decades, before women in America were even granted the right to vote.
It's an incredible resume.
It's almost impossibly long. Okay, so let's unpack this incredible trajectory. Our mission today is to go far beyond the battlefield. We want to uncover the specific, often overlooked achievements.
The organizational brilliance.
Yes, and the political maneuvering that really cemented her place as, a foundational American humanitarian.
We've done a deep dive into her life, from her rural Massachusetts beginnings all the way to her very complex, sometimes even controversial legacy.
We want to understand why her self-taught expertise, combined with just her sheer organizational will, was so revolutionary for her era.
And we have a clear roadmap for you. We're going to trace her surprising childhood influences that really molded her character.
Then we'll analyze her early professional struggles against these intense gender norms that hardened her resolve.
We'll chronicle the incredible chaos she managed on the Civil War front lines, detail the massive and, emotionally draining postwar project that located tens of thousands of missing soldiers.
And finally, we'll look at how she leveraged her international experience to found the American Red Cross and implement its unique and absolutely necessary American mission. To really grasp the organizational force of nature Clara Barton became, we have to start at the beginning, because her early life is just full of these deep contradictions.
It really is. She was born Clarissa Harlow Barton on Christmas Day, December 25, 1821, in North Oxford, Massachusetts.
And she was named after a character in a famous novel, Clarissa.
Right. But the reality of her childhood was, well, it was far less dramatic than her namesake. Despite the progressive environment she grew up in.
Which was pretty significant for the time.
Oh, absolutely. Her father, Captain Stephen Barton, was a respected militia member, a local selectman, and a known leader of progressive thought in their village. But Clara, she was profoundly shy.
The sources all use the same words.
They do. Very timid. It's noted that she relied almost entirely on just one known childhood friend, a girl named Nancy Fitz.
It's such a powerful image, isn't it? This future commander of massive relief efforts, a woman who would face down presidents and bullets, starting out as the quiet kid who was afraid of her own shadow.
But her father's influence was clearly monumental. Captain Barton instilled in her that essential combination of fierce patriotism and very practical humanitarianism. He was also a leader in a universalist community.
And that detail is going to pop up again later.
It is. It speaks to the kind of free-thinking, progressive environment she was raised in, even if she was personally very reserved.
So that's one influence. The second, and arguably the most pivotal one for her professional life, came really early, in the form of a major family crisis.
Yeah, when Barton was only 10 years old, this is 1832, her brother David sustained a severe head injury. He fell from a barn roof.
And she just put her childhood on hold.
Completely. This was her intensive, self-taught medical school. Because you have to remember, formal nursing programs didn't exist in the way we understand them today.
Right, there was no curriculum.
Exactly. So for the next 2 years, she acted as David's sole devoted nurse. And this wasn't just bringing him soup and water. This was hands-on, vital medical care.
What kind of care are we talking about?
The sources confirm she learned how to deliver all his prescription medications, and she even mastered the brutal 19th century practice of bloodletting.
You mean with leeches?
With leeches, attaching them to the skin to supposedly draw out the sickness.
Wait, she was managing leeches and administering pharmaceuticals as a preteen?
Precisely. It was a high-stakes, long-term commitment. But David eventually recovered fully.
And what that experience must have given her.
Confidence.
Yeah.
And confidence. When you know you can manage a serious medical crisis for 2 straight years and get a positive outcome, the world suddenly looks a lot less intimidating.
So, given her timidity, her parents had this wise idea. They suggested she pursue teaching as a way to, force her out of her shell.
And she took their advice. She studied at the Clinton Liberal Institute in New York, and she secured her first teacher's certificate at the very young age of 17. This was in 1839.
And what's fascinating here is why she was so good at it, especially when teaching often meant managing these unruly boys in rural schools.
Right. The source material notes that because she had spent her entire childhood playing with her 4 older siblings, 3 of whom were brothers and all her male cousins, she learned how to act like them.
So she could relate.
She could relate, and crucially, she could establish authority. She knew how to control the male students in her care. So she wasn't just teaching reading and writing, she was managing gender dynamics and achieving order through sheer competence.
That confidence then fuels this groundbreaking professional venture when she moves to New Jersey. In 1852, Barton was contracted to open the first ever free public school in Bordentown.
She was literally building an institution from the ground up.
From scratch, based on this principle of equal access to education for everyone.
And she was staggeringly successful at it. The success was quantitative and immediate. After just 1 year, she had hired an assistant, and together they were teaching over 600 people in this small town.
600 students.
The community was so proud they raised nearly $4,000, a huge sum back then, for a massive new building to house the school.
And here's where it gets really interesting, and where she faces the brutal reality of professional gender discrimination.
Right. The moment the new school was completed and after she had proven the concept was viable,
They replaced her.
they replaced her as principal with a man. The school board officially deemed the leadership position unfitting for a woman.
Unfitting for the woman who created the entire thing.
They demoted the founder, the visionary, the administrative genius to the role of female assistant. And the sources indicate it was more than just a demotion. It was a hostile work environment. People resented her success.
And this led directly to a nervous breakdown. She quit. That betrayal, that realization that professional excellence was absolutely no defense against patriarchy, that forced her to pivot again.
And that pivot took her to Washington, D.C. in 1855, where she took a job that was, for its time, absolutely revolutionary, a clerkship in the U.S. Patent Office.
The significance of this decision, it really cannot be overstated. We focus so much on the nursing, but this was a massive step for women in the workplace.
A huge deal. This was the first time a woman had received a substantial appointed clerkship in the federal government with a salary exactly equal to a man's.
And what was the salary?
$1,400 a year.
Right.
Which was a huge salary at the time. This wasn't a temporary or seasonal job. This was institutional parity.
So if this was such a triumph for, progressive governance, what was the immediate reaction from her colleagues?
The backlash was immediate and vicious and relentless. The male clerks saw her equal salary and her status as a direct threat to them.
So for 3 years?
For 3 years, she received constant abuse and slander. Just imagine going to work every day knowing you are the focus of professional resentment just because of your gender.
What kind of abuse?
Everything from whispered lies to having her character publicly questioned. Accusations of moral corruption, professional incompetence. She had to have immense mental fortitude just to show up.
And then the politics of the country shifted against her.
Precisely. The political winds turned sharply against her when the James Buchanan administration came in. Buchanan was openly, publicly opposed to women holding government offices.
So her position was reduced first?
First to a mere copyist, then in 1858 she was fired entirely. And the firing was explicitly due to political opposition and her association with what the opposition derisively called Black Republicanism.
Okay, let's pause there because that term, Black Republicanism, we need to define that for a modern audience. What did that mean in 1858?
It was a highly derogatory term. It was used by pro-slavery Democrats and anti-abolitionists to label the new Republican Party. It basically painted them as radical abolitionists who favored black civil rights over the interests of the white majority.
So by associating her with that term,
they were justifying her dismissal on both political and social grounds.
So she's fighting for women's professional rights, and at the same time she's being targeted for her anti-slavery stance. But she didn't stay defeated, did she?
No, not at all. She spent 3 years back home, but the moment Lincoln was elected in 1860, she returned to the Patent Office as a temporary copyist.
And she made it clear to her friends she wasn't just fighting for her own job.
No, she was explicitly hoping her presence and her competence would pave the way for other women to take on substantial roles in government service. It shows her long-term strategic vision wasn't just about her career, but about social progress for her entire gender.
The stage was set for war, and Barton's next pivot was swift. I mean, her connection to the Civil War wasn't a gradual process of volunteering. It was instantaneous.
Immediate. And it was catalyzed by the very first major violence of the conflict, the Baltimore riot, April 19th, 1861.
This was the first organized bloodshed of the Civil War.
And the victims, members of the 6th Massachusetts Militia, were transported by train to the unfinished Capitol building in Washington, D.C., which is very close to where she was living.
And the connection was deeply personal for her. She didn't wait for the War Department to issue an appeal or for some committee to form.
No, she went straight to the station and personally nursed 40 men. And what made this work so uniquely poignant for her was the shock of recognition.
She knew them.
She had grown up with some of them in Massachusetts and had even taught others. And this immediate, visceral experience, it just crystallized the massive logistical failure of the early war effort.
Right. She realized instantly that there was a critical lack of both medical supplies and simple comforts. The military was geared to move men and weapons.
Not bandages and clean clothing.
And this realization launched her into her most famous but maybe her least understood role.
The independent supply chain manager and battlefield logistics expert.
In early 1862, she started using her own apartment as a storeroom, distributing supplies she collected with friends. She was building a shadow logistics network.
That phrase, shadow logistics network, is absolutely key. Barton was identifying and solving a massive organizational gap that the official military systems just could not fill.
Why not?
Well, military supply chains were rigid, bureaucratic, and slow. They were focused on large depots far behind the lines. She needed a flexible, immediate system to get supplies exactly where the fighting was happening, moments after the first wounded fell.
And she faced intense opposition, didn't she? The official hierarchy did not want a woman interfering.
Oh, absolutely. The War Department, and especially field surgeons, they initially scorned her efforts. They saw her as an unwelcome distraction and interference. But she was persistent.
She got powerful support.
She did, notably from Senator Henry Wilson of Massachusetts, who used his political clout to advocate for her. And finally, in August 1862, she gained official permission from Quartermaster Daniel Rucker to transport and distribute supplies directly on the front lines.
Which effectively made her a civilian officer of logistics.
It did. And her system worked because she mastered the public relations aspect of supply. Her first big logistical win came after the First Battle of Bull Run. She placed an ad in a Massachusetts newspaper appealing directly to the public for supplies.
And the response was huge.
Overwhelming. The source says it resulted in a profound influx of supplies. She learned very quickly how to leverage the deep emotional connection the public felt for their soldiers into practical, immediate logistics. She became the trusted pipeline between the anxious home front and the bloody battlefield.
And working on the front lines meant exactly that. She was right there, distributing stores, cleaning field hospitals, applying dressings, serving food in close proximity to major battles.
Cedar Mountain, Second Bull Run, Antietam, Fredericksburg.
The sources show the desperate reality of 19th century warfare. There's that memorable detail from the Battle of Antietam.
The single bloodiest day in American history.
And she famously resorted to using corn husks as bandages because of the severe shortages.
Right. This wasn't a sterile environment. This was improvisation under fire.
What's also critical to note is that she provided assistance to both Union and Confederate soldiers. It reflects a neutral humanitarian ideal that was really ahead of its time.
And that would later form the bedrock of the Red Cross.
Beyond the medical and logistical work, her role was profoundly emotional, too.
She understood that a soldier's morale was as important as his wound dressing.
Yeah.
So she provided critical emotional support, reading books to the wounded, writing letters to their families, just helping keep spirits high in these terrible conditions.
Her commitment was absolute. There's a famous quote from this period where she says, "I shall remain here while anyone remains and do whatever comes to my hand. I may be compelled to face danger, but never fear it. And while our soldiers can stand and fight, I can stand and feed and nurse them."
That grit earned her significant recognition. In 1864, General Benjamin Butler appointed her lady in charge of hospitals for the Army of the James.
And she was often compared to her British counterpart.
Yes, earning the title Florence Nightingale of America. But most famously, she became known as the Angel of the Battlefield.
And the origin of that specific, iconic nickname It's traced directly to her logistical success, isn't it?
It is. It was earned after her timely arrival with a huge wagon full of supplies at a field hospital after the Battle of Cedar Mountain in August 1862. The surgeon on duty was completely overwhelmed and literally thanked God for her arrival. She provided assistance exactly when it was needed most, time and time again.
The danger she faced was constant and terrifying. The source material has this chilling demonstration of the peril she was in.
Yeah. During one battle, while she was attending to a wounded soldier, a bullet tore right through the sleeve of her dress. It missed her completely.
But it instantly killed the man she was attending.
This was not distant charity or safe administration.
No.
This was service delivered right in the eye of the storm.
We should also dig into her time in the Sea Islands of South Carolina from 63 to 64. She went there to join her brother David, who was now a quartermaster.
Right, and this period really broadened her humanitarian mission into the realm of civil rights. She became acquainted with prominent figures like the abolitionist and feminist Frances Dana Barker Gage.
And this was a critical point where her work fully integrated the medical mission with the political and social goals of the Union.
Crucially, she provided medical care directly to black soldiers, specifically those serving in the famed 54th Massachusetts Regiment after their attack on Fort Wagner.
And she was assisted in this by a local black woman named Betsy.
Yes, this was active, practical integration and abolitionist work, proving her commitment to equality extended far beyond just nursing white Union soldiers.
So when the fighting stopped, the organization she created it pivoted to the next crisis. Immediately after the war, the sources show Barton focused on a massive emotional and organizational void left by the conflict.
The crisis of soldiers who were labeled simply as missing.
A humanitarian crisis on a massive scale.
Tens of thousands of men had just vanished. Their distraught relatives were writing endless letters to the War Department, and those letters were largely going unanswered.
Because the soldiers were buried in unmarked graves or mislabeled or just unknown.
Exactly. So Barton recognized this void. She saw that the government lacked the machinery to perform this task of, grieving and reconciliation.
So she contacted President Lincoln directly.
She did.
Yeah.
And he gave her permission to officially respond to these heart-wrenching inquiries. This launched what she called the search for the missing men.
This was basically the United States' first massive, centralized forensic identification project, and it was run by a civilian woman.
From her office at 437 7th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C.
Help us grasp the scale of this. This sounds like an administrative nightmare.
Oh, it was colossal. It required relentless, tedious administrative work. Barton and her small staff, they processed and wrote an astonishing 41,855 replies to inquiries.
41,000.
Just think about that volume of heartbreak and bureaucracy. By the time the office closed, they had located and identified over 22,000 missing men.
And Congress eventually had to acknowledge the critical government-level function she had initiated.
Right, by appropriating $15,000 for the project. She essentially created an entire branch of governmental reconciliation out of thin air.
Her work then culminated in the most gruesome and perhaps most historically significant location of the entire war, Andersonville.
The Confederate prison camp in Georgia. The work there in the summer of 1865 was foundational. The camp was a nightmare of disease and starvation. 13,000 Union prisoners died there.
How did she manage to identify so many men when they were buried so haphazardly? It speaks to her meticulous process.
Well, she relied on a crucial piece of information brought by a surviving prisoner named Dorrance Atwater. He had secretly kept a detailed death roster, risking his life to preserve those records.
So she worked with him.
Directly, cross-referencing names, locations, dates of death. They spent that summer identifying, marking, and properly burying those 13,000 individuals. This effort transformed Andersonville into a national cemetery, and she continued this work for 4 more years, marking 20,000 more Union graves across the South.
After closing the Missing Soldiers Office in 1868, she achieved this widespread national recognition, and she embarked on a countrywide lecture tour.
Yeah, she was detailing her harrowing war experiences to captivated audiences. For a time, she was probably the most famous woman in the United States.
And it was during this period that she formally connected with other progressive movements.
Right. She met and established friendships with towering figures like Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass, which really solidified her alignment with the civil rights and women's suffrage movements. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a national celebrity and activist.
But the relentless pace of her life, it eventually took its toll.
It did. The sources say the strain of the lecture tour left her mentally and physically exhausted. In 1868, Under strict doctor's orders to rest, she closed the missing soldiers' office and traveled to Europe.
And this trip, intended for recovery, proved to be her second major professional turning point.
It was. While recovering in Geneva, Switzerland in 1869, she was introduced to the concept of the Red Cross and met a Dr. Appia,
And she was handed Henry Dunant's influential book, A Memory of Solferino.
which detailed the horrific lack of care in the Franco-Austrian War and advocated for these neutral, voluntary societies to provide relief during wartime.
And what's fascinating is how quickly she was absorbed into this global movement.
She didn't just read about it. Dr. Appia, recognizing her unique American experience and passion, invited her to be the representative for the American branch of this new international movement.
Her legitimacy was tested almost immediately.
Right? When the Franco-Prussian War broke out in 1870, she immediately applied her battlefield skills on a new continent. She assisted the Grand Duchess of Baden in preparing military hospitals, but then she moved into large-scale civil relief.
This was beyond tending to the wounded.
Far beyond. She managed complex humanitarian relief efforts. She superintended the supplying of work, giving jobs to the poor of Strasbourg after the siege of Paris. She also took charge of distributing supplies to the destitute people of Paris,
So this was administration, logistics, and employment coordination.
all under the banner of humanitarian neutrality.
And this international service garnered her significant honors.
Yes, she received the Golden Cross of Baden and the prestigious Prussian Iron Cross. That kind of decorated international standing, especially for a civilian woman, was critical.
It was currency.
It was leverage. These decorations and her proven administrative track record in a major European war gave her an international reputation that few American humanitarians had. This was the leverage she would need when she returned home.
So, armed with international acclaim and these powerful honors, Barton returns to the U.S. and she starts the movement to get recognition for the International Committee of the Red Cross by the U.S. government.
This is 1873, and this meant one thing, really: convincing the government to ratify the Treaty of Geneva.
And that's the crucial institutional context. She was trying to get the U.S. to ratify the Treaty of Geneva of 1864. This treaty established the rules for the neutrality of medical personnel in wartime and mandated the use of the Red Cross emblem.
So why was this such a tough sell? I mean, if the treaty just codified humane warfare, why wouldn't the U.S. sign immediately?
The U.S. had a strong isolationist stance in the post-Civil War era, especially against joining European treaties. The general belief was that America was physically distant, domestically secure.
So she faced immediate opposition, most notably when she met with President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1878.
And Hayes was clear. He basically said the U.S. would never again face a calamity like the Civil War. They just didn't see the need for a permanent, foreign-linked relief structure.
So Barton had to innovate her pitch completely. She had to move away from the wartime function of the Red Cross.
And she finally succeeded during the administration of President Chester Arthur by making this crucial strategic argument that completely shifted the focus.
Right. She acknowledged the U.S. desire to avoid foreign entanglements and argued that the new American Red Cross could respond to crises other than war.
She specifically cited natural disasters, earthquakes, forest fires, floods, hurricanes.
That sounds simple, but it was revolutionary. This focus on domestic disaster relief became the unique, non-military American amendment to the Red Cross mission.
It was the key to unlocking federal support.
It was. The American branch would be distinguished from its European counterparts. Barton made the Red Cross indispensable in peacetime, transforming it from a foreign treaty obligation into a vital domestic service.
Following that political triumph, she officially established the American branch. The first meeting was held in her own apartment in D.C., May 21, 1881.
And the very first local society was founded soon after, August 22, 1881, in Dansville, New York, near where she had a country home.
And as president, she immediately set out to prove the necessity of this American amendment. She threw herself right into the fieldwork.
To demonstrate that the organization was ready, flexible, and essential. And we have these detailed examples of her early domestic disaster relief efforts. We're not talking small donations. This was coordinated deployment.
Right. In 1884, she led efforts to aid victims of devastating floods on the Ohio River.
In 1887, she coordinated famine relief in Texas. In 88, a tornado in Illinois and a yellow fever epidemic in Florida.
Each event was proof that the U.S. did, in fact, face calamities that required a national coordinated response.
And her response to the Johnstown flood in 1889 really solidified the ARC's importance in the public mind. It created the modern image of organized disaster relief.
That flood was a national catastrophe, over 2,200 people killed.
And within days, Barton, then 67 years old, personally led a delegation of 50 doctors and nurses to the site. They didn't just provide immediate aid, they helped establish temporary hospitals and infrastructure. It was lasting work.
Her international work continued as well. What stands out most is her response to the Hamidian massacres in the Ottoman Empire in 1896.
That event tested her diplomatic resolve completely. Massacres of Armenian Christians were occurring, and accessing the interior of the Ottoman Empire for relief was nearly impossible.
But Barton didn't just send money.
No, she traveled directly to Constantinople and leveraged her international reputation, speaking with the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs.
That kind of diplomatic access, for an American civilian woman in the Ottoman Empire in the 1890s, that speaks volumes about her reputation.
It secured her access. She successfully negotiated the right to enter the interior and organize relief in Armenian provinces. This was major international relief managed at the highest diplomatic level.
Her final international field operation came during the Spanish-American War in 1898. At the incredible age of 77, she's working in hospitals in Cuba,
aiding refugees and prisoners. The grateful people of Santiago were so impressed, they built a statue in her honor that still stands today.
And her very last field operation as ARC president was closer to home, the devastating Galveston hurricane in 1900.
A storm that just destroyed the city killed thousands. Her relief effort there, among other things, established a large orphanage for children. She was truly a tireless, on-the-ground leader, always prioritizing the reality of human suffering over comfortable administration.
For someone so deeply involved in humanitarian and institutional work, it's really necessary to examine the foundations of her personal beliefs. Barton's wartime diary entries show she was a devout Christian.
Yes, specifically holding a strong belief in divine providence. She viewed her life and even major national events through a distinct spiritual lens. For instance, she wrote that she believed that Providence had ordained Lincoln's election.
And when reflecting on difficult decisions, she often turned to faith.
Right, writing things like, "God's will not mine be done. I am content." She wanted to keep in view the feeling that God orders all things precisely as they should be.
Her upbringing also gave her a specific non-mainstream denominational identity, didn't it?
It did. She identified herself in a 1905 letter as a Universalist, noting she was raised in one of the first Universalist churches in America in her hometown. And that denomination was rooted in progressive social thought, which aligns with her humanitarian tendencies.
This religious conviction often intersected with her political reality during the war, which created some fascinating complexity.
Especially regarding her identity as a woman. She firmly supported Lincoln and the Republican Party. But in 1863, she found herself in a sticky situation.
A Copperhead Democrat, and we should define that term, asked her to publicly denounce the Republicans.
Right. A Copperhead Democrat was part of a faction in the North, the Peace Democrats, who strongly opposed the Civil War, criticized Lincoln, and often held deeply racist, pro-slavery sentiments.
So she was being pressured by a political enemy to renounce the cause she was risking her life for. How did she respond?
She claimed neutrality. She responded by stating she was a U.S. soldier, not a statesman, and was profoundly ignorant regarding politics.
And this is where historians fiercely debate her intention.
Right. One historian, Stephen B. Oates, reads this statement as clear irony. Barton had proven political convictions and obviously understood the issues.
But the interpretation from historians like Nina Silber adds this crucial layer of nuance. It suggests it might have been an assertion of reality, not irony.
Silber argues that Barton emerged from the war more aware than ever of women's political weaknesses. So in Silber's view, this wasn't irony, but a strategic declaration that political power was structurally unavailable to her.
By claiming to be a soldier and ignorant of politics, she was asserting her right to serve without being dragged into the political fray.
Exactly. Recognizing that her power lay in action, not rhetoric.
That interpretation is fascinating. If she was truly feeling politically weak, how do the sources reconcile that with her immense success lobbying presidents like Arthur and foreign ministers just a few years later?
It really highlights the tension women in that era faced. Her success was never through formal political power, like voting. Her lobbying success relied entirely on her earned reputation, her moral authority, and the undeniable success of the organizations she led.
So it was influence she achieved despite her gender's political limitations.
Not because of them. She had to navigate the system by being absolutely indispensable.
And that tension between personal indispensability and institutional structure comes to a tragic head at the end of her time at the American Red Cross.
After decades of unparalleled service, in 1904, at the age of 83, she was forced to resign as president.
Which is just a classic tragedy of organizational maturation. The official criticism focused on her management style.
Right, that she was mixing professional and personal resources, blurring the lines of management and record keeping in a way that, modern organizations wouldn't tolerate.
But the deeper context is the shift in American culture, isn't it?
Exactly. She was forced out by a new generation of what the sources call all-male scientific experts who were pushing for professionalization. They favored the realistic efficiency of the progressive era over her idealistic humanitarianism.
And crucially, her egocentric leadership style.
Meaning her habit of acting quickly, individually, and often bypassing committees. She was the passionate, hands-on founder being replaced by bureaucratic management.
That she herself, ironically, had necessitated by creating such a large, successful institution. The organization outgrew the heroic individual who created it.
What's remarkable, though, is that even after this, she didn't retire. She immediately founded the National First Aid Society, recognizing that the need for community medical training was still unmet. She just shifted her organizational drive to a new challenge.
She died 8 years later, on April 12, 1912, at the age of 90, from pneumonia. She did manage to publish her autobiography, The Story of My Childhood, in 1908, ensuring her own narrative was preserved.
Barton's physical spaces continue to serve as these powerful reminders of her dual life, the personal commitment and the institutional creation. The most prominent is the Clara Barton National Historic Site in Glen Echo, Maryland.
Right, established in 1975. This site preserves her massive home, which also served as an early headquarters for the Red Cross when she arrived there in 1897.
And its historical significance is massive. It was the first National Historic Site dedicated specifically to the accomplishments of a woman.
The National Park Service did extensive restoration, restoring 11 rooms, including the Red Cross offices and her bedroom, so you get a tangible sense of her life and her work.
But maybe the most surprising and illustrative memorial is the rediscovery of her earlier headquarters, the Missing Soldiers Office.
The story of its rediscovery really does feel like an Indiana Jones script.
It truly does. That building was essentially lost to history after she closed the office in 1869. The DC addressing system was realigned, making the location hard to pinpoint, and the entire third floor was boarded up in 1913 and just forgotten for over 80 years.
And then, in 1997, a General Services Administration carpenter named Richard Lyons was checking out the building, which was slated for demolition.
And he followed a hunch, looked behind a wall, and found a boarded-up attic.
And that attic was a time capsule.
A treasure trove of Barton items, according to the sources. This wasn't just old dust. Lyons found original signs for the Office of Missing Soldiers, Civil War soldiers' socks, an army tent.
And most importantly, documents related to the work of locating those 22,000 men.
Right. And that discovery was what saved the building from the wrecking ball. The documents confirmed its monumental historical significance.
And after years of careful restoration, the Clara Barton's Missing Soldiers Office Museum, run by the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, opened in 2015. It's a literal link back to her massive, unseen post-war logistical feat.
It reminds us that her legacy is built on paperwork as much as it is on bandages.
Her tributes really do span the globe and the solar system. She was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1973. And yes, she even has a crater on Venus named after her Barton.
And her name lives on in countless other ways. There are 25 schools named after her, numerous streets like the Clara Barton Parkway in Maryland, and even nature honors her. The Clara Barton tree, a giant sequoia, stands proudly in Sequoia National Park.
So as we synthesize the life of Clara Barton, we see a woman who was a serial pioneer, driven less by a specific profession teacher, clerk, nurse, and more by an organizational imperative.
Right. If a crucial need existed, she would build the structure to fill that void.
She was the timid girl who used self-taught nursing skills to serve her brother, then leveraged that confidence to fight for equal pay in the federal government.
From there, she becomes the ultimate battlefield logistics expert, managing supply chains the government couldn't, before revolutionizing post-war administrative accounting through the Missing Soldiers Office.
That administrative feat then gave her the credibility to travel abroad, discover the Red Cross model, and return home to convince a skeptical U.S. government to join.
And finally, she convinced President Arthur to adopt the international model by giving it a unique, indispensable American twist, ensuring it also focused on domestic disasters. She created formal, national structures for care in an era where organized responses to crises before anyone else did.
The key takeaway then for you, the learner, is that monumental systemic change often begins with one person identifying a fundamental, unmet organizational need.
Whether it's knowing what happened to a missing soldier or providing immediate relief after a hurricane.
And then possessing the political will and the stamina to build the massive, structured organization required to fill that void. Her willingness to abandon personal comfort and confront bureaucracy, first as a teacher, then as a clerk, and finally as an activist against presidents and foreign powers. That is what defined her lasting impact.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to explore. Clara Barton was forced out of the organization she founded by a push for efficiency and professionalization.
The very institutional maturity she helped inspire by making the organization so large and successful. So consider this fundamental tension. Is it possible for an organization built purely on passionate, individualistic, humanitarian fervor to truly thrive and scale to a national level?
Without eventually needing the bureaucratic efficiency and structure that might ultimately squeeze out its passionate, eccentric, and indispensable founder.
It's a struggle between the heart of the mission and the ledger of the organization that every growing charity still faces today.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.